wanted to make this video because I feel like when things like this come out, they're seemingly insignificant in a way, or sometimes they can get brushed over really easily. But I feel like it really can't be underplayed how important this is. And so I'll be discussing a little bit about James Gunn and what he said and how it relates to the Marvel Cinematic Universe and how it relates to the DC Universe. I'm a big fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, sitting in Endgame, the Australian audiences aren't very vocal. I mean, I've watched, listened to American people talking about going to the movies, and they seem to be a lot more vocal about their appreciation or dissatisfaction with films and throwing forks or whatever the heck they do. I don't know. But there's a lot more vocal kind of things. And Endgame was one of the only films I feel like I've ever actually vocally, had like an outburst of like, whoa, when Captain America comes running along and picks up the hammer, and, that whole scene for me was just like, I didn't expect it. I didn't know what's going to happen. And it was just really epic. And I was just like vocally expressed myself. It can't be understated how amazing, up until Endgame, the Marvel Cinematic Universe was. The hype, the feeling, the anticipation. That was so great. But not so much recently. But the thing that I really want to talk about here is the aspect that I feel like underplayed a lot of their characters was, if someone died, they just kind of, you had the feeling like, oh, they'll come back. Infinity War happened, and that was one of the best films because it was the first times that the heroes lost. They always win, and this was the first time they lost. And that was great because it set up something so interesting, but we all knew, Endgame was coming. Of course they're going to bring these guys back. Of course there's going to be an epic, ultimate return of these characters, because they'd announced like Spider-Man was coming out and all this kind of stuff. So we knew that this was happening. But besides that, I mean, that was storytelling. I don't mind that. I don't really count that as part of this. The really consistent deaths, but returning, Loki was a big culprit with this. He died all the time and came back all the time, and he's the god of mischief, blah, blah, blah. But still, Bucky dies, he comes back in Winter Soldier. Even people like Vision, he's killed by Thanos, and it's got so much sadness in it, and it's all these things. And then he kind of like reemerges in WandaVision, which justifiably, they found an interesting way to build him up and like that journey that Wanda has to get him there, but still, like, he's kind of back. And Gamora, same thing. Like, it seems like a lot of these characters, they die, but they come back the same, or they come back as like a different version, but they always seem to kind of return. And this has been part of what we accept because it's a cinematic universe, it's comic books, it's like, this happens in the comic books all the time. But coming into now what James Gunn is saying, and I can really appreciate James Gunn. I've come to really acknowledge and appreciate what he's doing. He's so transparent, and he answers questions. He's so in touch with his fan base, and I haven't really seen that from anyone in the way he's done it. And so it gives us a lot of ideas of what he's doing and how he's structuring things. And coming into this DC cinematic universe, one of the things he's outlined, which we've discussed in the past, but which I think is great, is that screenplay comes first. Once he has a good screenplay, then the movie gets made. Until that point, it doesn't get made. Even in a recent article with Rolling Stone, there was a film that everyone was excited about. It was all ready to go. Everything was prepped. People were doing things, but it's like the screenplay wasn't ready. It wasn't right. And so he just had to cut it off. That is someone you want to see in charge, making the hard decisions, cutting off things that aren't working, but has a vision of what he wants. And as he's such a consistent writer and a good writer, he's produced a lot of good films and directed a lot of good films. But something else that's just recently been added to this kind of law that the DC universe has is that he said that if a character dies, answering a question, right? Someone said, oh, if the character dies, they'll come back. And he said, no. If a character dies, they stay dead. Dying in this universe means you're dead. And this is something you could kind of gloss over, but I wanted to talk about it because I just really feel like this is something that really matters. Someone dying in a film is supposed to be a really emotional, intense, sad, motivational moment for a character. Like it is often a crux of a turning point for a film, or a tragic end, and it needs to be that way for it to be lasting. So you think about some of your favorite films, right? Titanic. He died. Jack, good old Jack. Spoilers if you haven't seen this film that came out before you were born. Jack, if he had died at the end of the film and then all of a sudden they unfroze his icicle body and then were able to restore him to life, it would be kind of like, oh well, it's nice they're back together, but it's kind of not like the same. Lord of the Rings, Boromir dying. If Boromir dies in the Fellowship, and then somewhere along the line just pops up and he's like, I'm back to fight for Gondor, and then his tomato popping father is just overjoyed. It would just be like, oh, poor Faramir, and also this doesn't feel right. Characters dying makes their story epic. It seals their story in place and makes them a monument in a way. If this is the case for the DCU, it means so much, because it means that people are in real danger. If that gun is being pointed at Batman's head and bang, well, wow, Batman's gone. And I really appreciate this. It's so important that this is the case, because it means that the stories that we watch are going to have meaning. And not to say this wasn't done in Marvel. You got to give them some credit. Like, Tony Stark dies and he dies. Black Widow, she dies and she dies. That's great. She had a real ending, and I think bringing her back would be cheap. And I don't think she'd want to come back after all the stuff that happened with Disney. But I just think that moving forward, coming into this world of this fantastical world of DC, it's good to know that James Gunn's putting in place some things that are going to make things matter. But hey, what do you guys think? Do you think that this is important? Do you think he's going to stick to it? Do you think that Marvel was kind of guilty of this, or maybe we're being a bit harsh on them? Let me know in the comments below, and have a wonderful, fantastic, lovely day.